Also, a major goal of ours is for the system to be for people who enjoy the outdoor world, to enjoy the story and exploration. So if you're a person who's only interested in raiding, this system is, you can completely ignore this if you want to. And you won't be missing out on any player power of any kind. This is just
nut, 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 nut.
There's a Morgan Day interview. There is. I think there's an actual video too. I haven't seen it or really read anything about it. The summary on Wowhead takes like 3 minutes to read. The video is an hour long. So are you saying that I can milk more content by watching the video? No, but really though, I actually do like watching videos because you can actually hear the inflection and them talk about it, and that's good. I like hearing it from their mouths instead of summarized versions. Yep, pause in the middle for takes. Yep. I hope today I rip the max special, which is hear a question asked and then talk about what I want to hear from them and ask questions and be unsure of something, only for me to unpause the video and them answer it less than 10 seconds later. That's the classic. One thing I really want them to clarify, just what I'm looking for from this. Here we go. Creation catalyst, blah, blah, blah. This will serve to help anyone who's having bad luck on a particular armor slot or help alts quickly catch up later in the patch. I just really want some clarification, and don't spoil me, because I'm sure it's there. I really hope that they've learned the lesson that anytime you're thinking about something ever saying later in the patch, that shit is available fucking day one. Not week 3, week 2, 1. Day 1. That's it. Nothing else.
Awesome that you are
all
here.
Right.
It's awesome you're able to make it. And we are super excited to talk all about Zereth Mortis and all the other fun things coming in 9.2.
All right, so before we go any farther, I know what you're thinking, Max. You're pausing 20 seconds in. That's fine. I'll pause as much as I want. Those are 2 magnificent beards. I mean, look at that.
So welcome back.
Holy shit. Look at this thing.
I call it. Yeah, it's definitely been a minute.
You got that beard going on. You got this beard.
Yeah, like at an event where there was...
That's fucking impressive.
Now, obviously, there's a lot of story to be told in Eternity's End and kind of wrapping up, this final chapter of the Shadowlands.
Okay, might be a skip.
We don't really want to get into story beats and story stuff, so we're going to leave that, off the table for
hold up.
End and
the destination.
Let me hear that again.
Now, obviously, there's a lot of story to be told in Eternity's End and kind of wrap.
Now, when I hear that, I'm like, I'm going to have to skip half this interview. But then he goes...
up, this final chapter of the Shadowlands. We don't really want to get into story beats and story stuff. So
oh man, this video is going to take 3 hours to react to. Let's go.
Off the table for tonight, but there's some stuff that we do know about what we're going to be doing in Zereth Mortis that we want to talk about a little bit. One thing that was mentioned at the outset, like as the content update was debuted, was that legendary crafting was going to be focused around materials that we get out of Zereth Mortis. So I wanted to just to know like an overview of kind of what that system looks like how do we get these materials, and how long do you think it's going to take for the average player to get their first legendary to max rank? Are we going to need
these questions? They're so good.
Rank 4s or rank 6s to get started? Are we going to need Soul Ash, Soul Cinders to, make a brand new legendary slot and then rank it all the way up to 8? Or, what's kind of the thought process for how players are going to...
This guy's just fucking yapping right out the jump. Look at him.
Yeah, totally. So with the updates that were introduced in Eternity's End, there will be a new rank of legendary. There will be essentially a 7th rank item that is introduced with a new optional reagent.
Okay.
And to upgrade that, you'll need, at least the name of it right now is Cosmic Flux. That new currency that you're going to earn, that's something that we've actually talked about a lot and have been looking to use it in different ways. If you're familiar with like Echoes of Nyalotha,
not from Torghast.
Blueprint for what we're trying to achieve with
not from Torghast
currency.
How the fuck did Echoes of Nyalotha work? It just came from everything. Oh fuck yeah.
So lots of different activities will give you this currency, from raids to Mythic Plus to some of the outdoor content. You'll even earn it in Torghast. So in terms of your question of previous items, yes, you'll still need to kind of create and craft and get the Soul Ash and Cinders.
That's fine. We have a year to do that.
Most recent
you can get it instantly.
Content and ranks, you'll use this new currency We're also using that for something called the creation catalyst, which is something that we're actually really excited about, where this is something where players will be able to craft their set items using items that they've earned through different pieces of content and using this cosmic flux stuff. So that's something that will not be there right at launch. Similar to kind of what we were talking about with Echoes of Nyalotha and played a role in the corruption system. That wasn't something that was there right away.
That was bad.
There should still be opportunities for players to earn that gear through, doing normal content like Mythic Plus and raids. But there's certain items or certain elements of player power where we feel like there's probably a delta of power where if you don't get the thing that will, make your character a certain increase better, it can get really frustrating to feel like there's, to get the whims of RNG there, right? And this is an opportunity for us to really like cut the tail off of that bad luck that some players might experience.
Yeah.
So that was something that we wanted to
I'll let him finish.
Launch right away with Eternity's End, which is really, points to a larger philosophy shift that you might have seen some changes in 915 that kind of were along these lines. And we really wanted to take those ideas and those philosophies and carry them forward into Eternity's End and future updates to really, represent like, yes, look, here are the things that you can earn. This is the way that you'll be able to catch up. Or if you have a new alt, this is something that character will be able to take advantage of. So this is a much larger system that this will be one of the elements that it plays into.
It's hard with words at this point, right? Because there's just been so many things they've said they wanted to do, and it just like didn't end up like that, right? Like, let's just say, for example, in this interview, he says all the right things. There'll be a certain amount of people that are skeptical and are like, you know what? I just need to see it play out literally one fucking time, where it's not some mess of getting things super late and it's really hard to get into and it's super gated and stuff like that, right? It's like that's reasonable, I think. But yeah, it all comes down to exactly when they want to put that in the game. Because so like not everything, I think people get off on like time gating. They hear time gating and they're like, that's instantly bad. A lot of like something can be time gated, meaning you don't get it like week 1 of the patch, but you get it like week 2 or 3 before you do any real content. It actually makes no difference at all, right? Like the difference between all of Korthia being available on the first day versus like just the first part, and then a few days later you get a little bit more. That's fun. That's actually like fine game design. There's not that can play out well. Not to say Korthia was good for that specifically. I'm just saying like that innately does not mean it's bad. The things that are really bad for catch up are the mechanics that help a new player get into the game when they're starting from behind or an alt. So like an example would be account-wide essences, right? Account-wide essences made the game 100 times better to play, but it came way too late, right? We want those systems, the corruption vendor, the legendary vendor in Legion. We want those systems instantly there. And they said they're doing an Echoes of Nyalotha. I hope he elaborates on this, because I want to hear what they do with Torghast. And this is probably one of their next questions if I'm going to guess, because that's what I would ask him to elaborate more on how you're going to be upgrading your legendary with the Echoes of Nyalotha. But I wonder if it's too late, because like obviously you guys have heard me make the argument like 100 times that Torghast is basically a failed system, something people will not look back fondly on, almost for the sole reason that it was a weekly requirement. They made it a chore. They made it something you had to do to improve your character. The second you do that, you have to make it completable by everyone in the game, which means you have to nerf it. You can't make it challenging. You can't do any of that. In fact, when it was challenging at the beginning, they immediately nerfed it. Then you trivialize your content and you make it meaningless garbage. So you have to allow that content to be standalone for it to ever be something that people actually enjoy and want to go do for their own reasons, for a challenge, for cosmetic rewards, whatever. But if it's tied to power, it sucks ass. This is what I wanted to ask you guys. If they make Torghast in this patch, great. You don't have to do it for power ever. The only reason you ever go to Torghast is to do some cool shit. Is it too late for Torghast to ever be remembered as something like picture this, right? Like Mage Tower came in like one of the last patches of Legion, but it's widely regarded. If Mage Tower was there from the jump, but it sucked, but then it was good in the last patch, where people would have remembered it fondly. I feel like for people, a lot of it is too late. So yeah, I'm just interested to see how that goes.
So with this, the cosmic, I missed the second part of the device that we use to create tier items.
The creation catalyst uses cosmic flux.
Oh my goodness, the CC. So with the creation catalyst,
I actually learned this.
This is like if an item dropped from the end of run from a Mythic Plus dungeon, I could take that item to this creation catalyst, provided it was an item that lined up with a tier set slot. and upgrade it to a tier set piece. There's the concept behind that.
Yeah, and something that we're trying to be really cognizant of there is when you do upgrade items into tier items, they will have static stats. It's not, we didn't want you to be in a position where you were trying to fish for the right item to get the right stat combination. So once you get the set item will be the same thing no matter what.
Okay, that's fine. That's how it's always been, right? And he's referring, this is a little bit off of what they were talking about, but he's kind of just reiterating what the legendary or what the tier system will be like, which is there is going to be some kind of bad luck protection where through all forms of content, sounding like through the Echoes of Ny'alotha system, PvP, Mythic Plus, World Quest mobs, fucking everything, drop this essence that you can use to create or turn a base item into a tier piece, and apparently the stats will all be the same, so you don't have to, like... Because what he just said is important, right? Do you know how fucking annoying it would be if you had to, like, go into Mythic Plus and find the perfect statted, like, chest piece or something just to turn it into tier? That would feel like shit, right? So he's saying that won't be a thing. No matter what, it's always going to be haste crit, or whatever it is determined for your class.
And can they roll tertiaries, like our speed and our, avoidance and all that kind of fun stuff? Because people are going to be rolling them over and over again to try and get those.
That's a great point. We have, learned our lesson with, I believe, some of the pearls and the Nashtar updates.
Yes.
Benthic armor, thank you. I don't know off the top of my head, but I'm going to go on a limb and say that's not something we would want people to feel like they need to do.
Okay, great. That's good to know.
God bless.
As far as tier sets go, how many tier set pieces are there? We know we have 2 set and 4
5.
set based off of leaked
It's
stuff
leaked,
that's
right?
starting to sort of pour out from data mining. But how many actual pieces of gear are there in a tier set?
There's 5.
5.
Yeah, why that's important, Chad, is the last time there was tier in this game, Legion, there was actually 6 pieces. There was the cloak added to the normal 5 tier items. Why that's significant and why I think it's good going forward is 5 means you usually only ever use something from the current tier. What you used to do is you used to use lower eye level 2 pieces from previous raids in the current raid, which is okay for someone who's playing a lot and it can actually make your character more fun to play. The bad part is people who are coming in late have to go farm older raids to get items, which is super fucking weird. I think it's generally speaking not preferred by the players to do something like that. But there is an argument where some players do like that, by the way. There's definitely a WoW crowd that does not like that every time a new season comes out, you replace everything you have with everything new from the season. There's some people that miss the days where this dungeon trinket was super sick for like a really long time. I'm not really one of those people. I don't mind the way... I think there's issues with loot. That's not one of them. Like, for example, if you tell me, like, you think it's cool and novel that, like, Arcano Crystal, a fucking world boss trinket, is good for the whole expansion, I think that's actually just bad. Like, I think that's bad design. I think it's... You want your character to change, right? So every raid you do, you want to be using new trinkets and stuff like that because you want to keep it fresh. You want to try new things. I, generally speaking, don't like it when you use the same item for a super long period of time, but some people absolutely disagree with me there.
And when it comes to the actual tier set bonuses themselves, I've always enjoyed tier sets that really sort of push players to adapt a little bit the way they play the game based off of whether or not they're wearing a 2 set, 4 set, or
I want to hear the answer to this so much, man.
not wearing those set bonuses at all. Is that something that we're going to be looking for coming into these tier sets and these bonuses with the return of tier set bonuses? It kind of feels like a really
fantastic podcast voice too.
Exciting time for a lot of players. It's just, is it going to really dynamically change up the way they play a bit?
Yeah, that's totally the goal. As you've seen with previous tier sets, that's something that we want players to look at that set and then feel like they need to change their gameplay in some way, shape, or form, change their rotation maybe to fully take advantage of that. And we feel like that's an interesting organic way to kind of change up your gameplay patch over patch so that you're not, your moment-to-moment gameplay isn't the exact same over the course of the expansion. So this feels like a great opportunity to kind of re-inject that. So that is absolutely still the goal. And as you mentioned, a lot of these set bonuses are actually already they're in the patch, which players haven't seen yet. However, as you mentioned, data mining is starting, and one of our goals is always to try to get that stuff up on the PTR as quickly as we can so that people can check it out, they can test it, they can give us feedback on some of those set bonuses, and we're always looking to make changes based off of that.
Yeah, so I looked at the tier bonuses. I think a lot of them do that. A lot of people say, a 20% buff to Blade Dance doesn't really change anything. I mean, it kind of does. Like right now in a pure single target situation, oftentimes you ignore Blade Dance, which in my opinion is bad design. I think if you have an ability, like the fact that you generate with one ability or with your auto attacks with Demon Blades and you spend with only one ability and pure single target is actually boring as fuck. Throwing in something off of a cooldown is good. So adding that buff to Blade Dance, I haven't seen the theory crafting for it yet, but I imagine that means you'll actually press that button on single target and maybe play First Blood, which would be a good change for Demon Hunter. It would make it a better and more fun class to play, certainly. It's the same thing with Windwalker, right? They're dealing with it with Tyr, which you could argue, hey, don't do it with Tyr, just make Fist of Fury do more damage all the time and just balance it around that anyway, and then give us Tyr that does something else, you know, like Crackling Jade Lightning shit and stuff like that. I guess that was a legendary, but it like went along with that Tyr. Yeah, sure, but that Windwalker bonus is going to change the way you play. With Fist of Fury is going to become your most important button, I think. I haven't looked at the numbers yet, but I think it is, and it should. That's how Windwalker should always be. I haven't looked at a lot of them, and I can tell you right now, with fucking 36 specs in the game, they're going to miss. Not every single Tyr bonus is going to be fucking incredible. Some of them are going to miss. Like the Resto Shaman one is fucking horrible. But the thing is they're not done. So what we need to do is tell them that they're horrible and make sure they understand that, because it's a work in progress, and hopefully they fix it. Because some of them are actually dog shit, but some of them are actually really fucking cool. So I'm glad they brought the Tyr back the way they did. I think overall the bonuses look really good. But it's also not surprising they're good, because they were used to pumping out a Tyr bonus for like every spec and every class every 6 months for like 10 years. And then they stopped doing it for 3.5 years, and now they're doing it again, which means they've had 3.5 years to think about it. So it's not surprising that some of them are good. And it's not surprising to me that the Resto Shaman one is the way it is. If you're unfamiliar, the 2-piece buffs your Chain Heal crit, which is a spell you don't really use now. Maybe said you'll probably use that a lot more, obviously. And the 4-piece reduces your cooldown on your Spirit Link totem for every Chain Heal crit. So you can like reduce Spirit Link totem, but that's not throughput. And it feels terrible. Like compare that to the other healer 4-pieces like Paladins, right? That's fucking insane. So yeah, they need to look at that. But yeah, all you guys can do, if you guys want this to be better, if you're playing class and you're like, man, I don't know if the 4-piece really works, actually give them that feedback, because early in PTR is where these things actually change.
Does it work in every zone? I'm just, putting it out there back from the Azerite armor days and from the other stuff of some particular bonuses only work in some areas, and
yeah, not like Shards of Domination.
No.
These bonuses won't work everywhere.
Man, that's refreshing to hear.
Good to know.
Because hopefully they realize that Shards of Domination, and this is not just to like beat a dead horse or pile on, it needs to be understood that Shards of Domination, the concept and how you achieve them, and the idea that they ever in a way replaced tier sets is absurd. They didn't change the way you played. They were meaningless % damage increases that didn't interact with your character at all, almost, outside of like crit with the Frost set. I mean, it was just an absolute fucking disaster. Worst system they've ever made, in my opinion. Awful.
One thing, it's been a while since we've seen, traditional class-based set items, set pieces, and bonuses. When we used to get them routinely, we used to have tokens that would drop that would be for 3 or 4 different classes, and we used to have the option to master loot them out, which was really useful if you had, say, like one Demon Hunter in the raid and nobody could ever get a Demon Hunter set item to drop from personal loot. You could flip the boss, get some tokens, and then get that set piece taken care of. Has there been any thought or discussion about like, oh, you know what, if we have sets, then tokens are kind of a nice option?
They're fucking killing it. This is such a good question. The last time we had tier in this game, we had Guild Masterloot. And a lot of people look at Masterloot with like negative connotation. They're like, oh, that's the thing that people use to like ninja loot. It's like in Guild Masterloot, you couldn't really do that. That's the thing where like, I raided in this old evil guild and they always gave their favorite people loot and stuff like that. Yo, a lot of guilds that don't go for world first and don't raid at a super, super high level used Masterloot so they could finish certain sets before moving on to another. If you're a raid group, you should want 5 or 6 people to have a completed 4-piece as they're doing content, rather than having fucking 20 people with 2-piece or a 3-piece or a 1. Like personal loot in a non-token system with tier presents pretty huge problems. Now, I'm assuming their answer to this question is going to involve something like, no, we want to keep personal loot, and this is one of the main reasons we're using the creation catalyst, where, you can actually craft your tier pretty fast. And that actually is true. Like, let's just say on the first heroic week, you get enough essences to craft 1 tier item. And then the second week, you get a second one. That and personal loot is going to mean everyone's getting their 4-piece really fast. So that actually won't be as much of a problem. However, I would urge them, if that's not that fast, to actually make them tokens, certainly, but make them tradable no matter what. It's actually really important. Because not world first stuff, like a lot of guilds will have trouble finishing certain pieces, and it's going to feel bad going into the raid if the system isn't fast enough. They kind of have two options there. You have to make the tokens tradable regardless of whether you already have tier or not. That's way too slow of a system with tier, believe me. Or they need to make the creation catalyst actually be available instantly and very quickly.
Is there some thought about maybe the future of Masterloot in a world where set items are back?
They're going to say no Masterloot for sure.
I guess two parts of that question. As far as the tokens go, I guess just getting into a little more details about what it'll look like. When the raid first opens, set items will drop from the raid. You'll kill the boss, you'll loot the corpse, you will take the item from the boss's corpse, equip it. Yay.
Right.
Well, not yay, because sometimes you kill bosses, get loot, and don't want to equip it because it's not good for your class, and then you can't trade it to your friend for absolutely no fucking reason. So besides that part, yeah. But, okay, let's see if their tokens are regular
Other
loot.
activities will have them available through the Great Vault. Part of the goal there was, as we saw with Shards of Domination, one of the things we were trying to achieve with that was to give raids a unique, benefit, something that is exciting about raids of like, okay, cool, I'm going to do raids because I want my Shards of Domination. With these sets, we recognized we can't just give sets to the raid, but we do still want the raiding player base to feel like they have an advantage when it comes to acquiring their sets, at least early on. And then some period into the...
They're going to drag you for that. Not the raiders, but everyone else. But fuck yeah, let's get it.
Patch will likely be tied to, some amount of content that you've completed. You'll unlock the creation catalyst, at which point everyone can just start to create set items, and then any item that can become a set item is essentially a token at that point.
I really don't like the sometime into the past. You can't do this. You cannot have the creation catalyst be something that happens too late and not allow tier pieces to be a token and be tradable. You can't. You're recreating the same problem that just happened. Dude, there's no fucking shot they do this again, man. There's no way. It is actually beyond reality. It is not possible for them to have a good system made and release it once everyone quits because they can't get what they want. There's just no fucking way.
So that's kind of the idea that we're going for there. And then you said the M word. That's not something. So, we recognize personal loot has problems, both for the players at the high end as well as people that are just...
Forget the players at the high end. I really think if you're making changes about loot or anything involving the high end, it's always wrong. We're always going to do the most degenerate shit. Case in point, when Masterloot was a thing, we did a ton of fucking runs all day, every day during Heroic Week to get gear. You know what we do now? The exact same thing for like probably 1/20th of the gain. Like you probably trade like 5 or 6 total items in the first week. It requires someone getting an item on a boss and looting that same armor piece later in the raid, and they can happen to trade it. It's super fucking rare, but we still do it.
Kind of casually running dungeons.
I know he means all Mythic Raiders with high end, but I'm saying, yeah.
Philosophically, making changes to something like how our loot rules work is something that we wouldn't do in a patch. That's something that we'd really want to revisit, like on an expansion boundary.
Right. Now, you touched on something there.
So they're basically saying, regardless of anything, we're only ever going to look at looting logic in an expansion, never in a patch. Okay, and that's no reason to talk about it because they're obviously not going to elaborate on that more. Okay, it's not that part that bothers me. It's the thing before that about the creation catalyst. His words just made it sound like the creation catalyst is going to come out a month to like a month and a half after the patch comes out. I'm not going to overreact to it because some period into the patch, first of all, it's early in PTR. It could be changed. Second of all, that could actually mean 2 weeks, which would be fine too. I just want to point out almost any time you would have heard rhetoric from them before a patch about talking about any system being sometime later in the patch, people universally hated almost all of those systems, and for the exact reason that it was later in the patch. I'm not going to bother naming them. You know exactly what I'm talking about. What's the other thing? He said that tier's going to drop. So let's just say it's not going to be a token per se. So let's say you kill the third boss, and that third boss drops tier for these 4 classes. So if you're a druid and it drops off that class, you'll loot druid shoulders, not shoulders that, if you don't need them, could be traded to those other 4 classes. You could just only trade them with other druids. Isn't a token just better? You having a boss, let's just say it's the third boss, and it drops a tier piece for druids, hunters, mages, and warriors, or something like that. Isn't that already basically a token? Unless they all have different specific pieces? But why even make it that complicated? Couldn't you actually just make it a tier token to where if you loot a token for whatever your class is off of the third boss or the 8th boss, you could turn both of those into helms if you wanted to. Or You can make one a glove and one a shoulder or whatever. You can make them into any piece. You want to make it as accessible as possible. The problem has been accessibility. You need to make tier sets accessible to people so they can play with them. They don't want to wait 3 to 4 weeks to get their tier bonuses, man. It's old shit.
While we're chatting about loot, I wanted to talk a little bit about the Great Vault.
Sure, yeah.
How has the team sort of felt the Great Vault has done this expansion? Like, do you like the mechanic? Is the team
Great question.
Happy with it?
First of all, I want to know your all's opinion on the Great Vault before he answers, because I feel like it's really polarizing. The Great Vault basically replaced the old PvP cache plus the weekly vault. Or the weekly thing. I think early on in a patch, it's much, much better for targeting items, because, I mean, it's actually just a straight up... it's also technically replacing bonus loot, too. But also they wanted to reduce the amount of loot you got in this expansion, so that makes sense. Dude, honestly, I like it. I think it's really good. I think people have a lot of complaints later on in a patch because they're not getting items they really want. But if you think about what it's replacing, in BFA, your weekly vault item was almost always not an upgrade, you know, like 2 months into a thing. But early, it's actually like gives you a ton of variety. So I think they have the right idea early, but late it just kind of falls off. It's still fine compared to what the system was, but can you improve it to have more relevance later on in a season, I guess is the question. At least that's how I feel about it. But I think overall I think it's generally a good thing. And they are doing one thing this patch which is good with it too. One of the biggest issues with the Great Vault is when there's been required raid items in certain slots, and things can still drop from your Mythic Plus cache that are never usable. An example would be Domination Shards, and well, don't think about how bad Domination Shards are, but just like specifically the pieces, because there's a lot of raids where like you need certain pieces from the raid or tier, like for example, this time where if you looted chest, helm, gloves, legs, or shoulders in your Mythic Plus vault or your Great Vault from Mythic Plus, those were like dead slots and they didn't prevent them from dropping. So a way that they're addressing that going forward is if you get those slots, you can turn them into like the same eye level tier bonus with like the new system, right? So I think that's actually a good change to it, but kind of have to see how it plays out.
Yeah, I would say overall successful. Certainly it's a big improvement from, you know, the systems that we had in place for BFA where there was just the chest and you loot it and you get what you get.
It's much better than the chest.
Obviously, we're always looking to improve that.
Just another thing too is you guys keep bringing up bonus loot. I don't think that the Great Vault was supposed to replace bonus loot plus the vault plus the PvP chest. I think it was only there to replace the PvP chest and the vault, and like the regular weekly chest that you got in BFA. I think they just wanted bonus rolls out of the game. I think they felt like bonus rolls geared you up too fast. Like it was just giving you too much loot. Like they buffed it since then and they overcorrected. But at the beginning of this expansion, it wasn't an accident that you got much less loot. They did that on purpose. Why? Because they removed the artifact power grind from the game, which was a massive thing for the last 4 years. And they replaced it and they wanted gear to be the grind again. In my opinion, the best grind that's ever been an MMO has been a gear grind. You want to constantly play the game to make your character more powerful. And in WoW, the primary medium for that, especially opposed to other MMOs, is gear is everything. You're basically logging in every day of the season to make your gear better. So you're trying to elongate that. I'll use the Diablo 3 example. If you guys watch my stream, you've heard me make this 100 times. There has to be a medium in how hard it is to get loot and how easy it is. You don't want it to be insanely easy, even as much as you think it does. If you've ever played a Diablo 3 season, it's actually pretty fun, right? But you play it for like 2 or 3 days, and you play and you keep getting upgrades every hour, 30 minutes, and then eventually you get to a point in a Diablo 3 season where you're basically playing for like 3 or 4 hours, you know, to get an ancient, better itemized piece. And that's then like the time you're playing per your character getting stronger is no longer fun. A better example of that would be if you started a Diablo 3 season with best in slot loot, you would do like a couple of greater rifts to test your limits, and then you would just stop playing the game. The fun in RPGs is gearing your character up. So them removing bonus rolls, you know, if you want them back or not, the reason was they wanted to smooth out the obtaining of gear. But obviously it's always a super delicate balancing act of how fast do they get gear and how slow do you get gear. Obviously in week 1 and in season 1 for PvE people, it was clearly too much of a reduction to remove that much loot from Mythic Plus, that much loot from raids compared to what we've been used to. Because you guys know why we got more loot last expansion, right? Last 2 expansions, because Titan Forging, dog shit ass Titan Forging was a thing. They were like, okay, let's shower you with loot, and the reason why is a percentage chance it Titan Forges and becomes an upgrade. I hated that system, but the quantity was required to have that work. When you remove Titan forging and make sockets, which are much less impactful than old sockets, the power of the gear is the gear itself and not some random juki bullshit that like rolls on top of it, right? So you have to reduce the quantity, or else you're just showered in loot that's always an upgrade. And that makes it too fast to gear up, and it doesn't make you appreciate the season as much. That's the idea, right?
One of the cool things with the Eternity's End update is, you know, set items can drop in the Great Vault, which is going to be pretty cool. And we're, like we mentioned, introducing the Creation Catalyst. Something that we think we can for sure improve is, you know, we always talk about when your reset rolls around, whatever region you're in, and you open the Great Vault, like, it should feel like Christmas. There should always be something exciting for you in there.
Well, kinda, but how do you deal with that over a long patch? Because honestly, it is Christmas. They get that, right? Like the Great Vault is always an upgrade for like 3 to 4 weeks, unless you're like super unlucky. It is Christmas. You're getting some fucking fat ass upgrade. How do you maintain that over a season is the question, because I just think inevitably it becomes less interesting.
You know, we have the alternate option that is not a loot item, or that is not one of the loot items, and I think there's some stuff, you know, there's some improvements we can make to make sure that there's always something exciting for the players to achieve. But overall, I think the Great Vault has been really successful. There are certainly some aspects to it that we're discussing in terms of, you know, if we bring it forward, you know, what do we do? What do we change? One of the major areas we're talking about, which aligns with a lot of the philosophy discussions we've been talking about, is just when it comes to catch up, when it comes to alts, you know, that feeling like, well, I've missed 4 weeks of the Great Vault, that really stinks. What can we do to kind of alleviate some of that feeling? So that's definitely an area that we're looking at for future us. But with the Eternity's End update, yeah.
Has there been any discussion or thought around allowing the alternate currency you choose to allow you to re-roll your options that you're being presented in the vault? Almost like
that's been discussed.
You know, a thought?
Yeah, that's very much a suggestion that we've for sure talked about. All different means of ways to interact with the
That's
vault,
thick
right?
smoke,
like,
though.
Can I re-roll it? Is it like, I always love the Hearthstone Battlegrounds example of like, can I freeze items? Like, you know,
Oh, wow. Okay, yeah.
There's things that we have discussed in terms of how does a player interact with it.
Okay. That's actually a really good idea. Did you hear what he just said? So you could like, so if you guys are unfamiliar, if you play a game of Hearthstone Battlegrounds and you're like buying units, you can freeze the board to always be that board when you re-roll a new turn. So you could do it early in a vault where, let's say you get like 2 items, you're like, holy fuck, do I get the best weapon or the best trinket? I got them both. I'm so lucky. Wow. Okay, well, you can like hit a button that freezes one of them, that spot is guaranteed going to roll that item next week as well. That's actually a fucking cool idea. They should do that.
All right, let's pivot a little bit to actual raid and raid mechanics and stuff happening in raid.
Sure.
One of the pieces of feedback I raid with a mythic team, and we went through this growing pains
Tremendous beard.
experience of KT as an example, where the boss itself
Oh,
phase transition
dude,
based.
holy fuck! Look at his fucking face when he brings up KT. Dude, honestly, I feel bad for, because like, you know, they all feel that way about KT. I mean, that just has to be one of the most fundamental disasters from any fight designers of ever. Look at this. Look at his fucking reaction.
Raid mechanics, experience of KT as an example, where.
Oh, and it gets even better. 1 frame.
The boss itself phase transition based off health. Certain abilities can happen below certain health pools. Is that something that I know it got addressed later, and it was something that was expressed the team wasn't super happy with? Is there similar
Oh yeah, that little eyebrow raise
mechanics we might be running into in this next raid that maybe something like that we're kind of worried about?
We're always really careful not to, you know, step on the same landmine twice in a row. Like, you know, the example we always talk about, like, which we still discuss internally, is Tomb of Sargeras was frequently.
I want to let him finish. I'm sorry. I just had this thought, and I'll forget it because I'm stupid. They do have a history of doing this, what he's going to talk about. They overcorrect a lot. If anything ever happens, they make a massive shift. He's going to bring up Tomb of Sargeras. That was the last raid that had prominent soak mechanics on every boss. They overdid it, and then they virtually did not exist for like multiple raids, straight up. There was just soak mechanics were actually gone from the game. Immunity use was virtually gone from the game. It was like 1 fight a raid for a couple of raids. And it's because they overcorrect. So it's actually really interesting to see how they do this. I actually brought this up earlier today in a separate conversation where 1 week raids are really uncommon. In fact, a lot of things have to happen for that to be the case, right? Like, look at this raid. Sylvanas was a very formidable last boss. But the only reason this was a 1 week tier was because 3 of the 4 last bosses, including Sylvanas, so Sylvanas being the hard one, were absolute jokes compared to what they were supposed to be, right? It only would have taken one of those bosses to be made correctly. It was like a anomaly that there was 3 that were that bad. If one of those bosses was made correctly, it's a 2 week raid minimum. Not even to mention more, right? So that coupled with the fact that apparently they're looking to not test the last 3 bosses, which we'll get into later. I did hear that part of this. It's very unlikely they will err. In fact, what they're likely to do is err on the side of those bosses being too hard because of that, and then might have to nerf them as well. Typically, they overcorrect in ways like that. So,
called Tomb of Soak Garrus. Like, there's lots of soaks. We definitely felt like with Sanctum of Domination, there were a lot of mechanics or a lot of lots of strong word. There were several, more than we would have liked, where it felt like holding your DPS was the correct decision.
This is an interesting conversation.
Just speaks to, the power of cooldowns in our game and how strong they've become over time.
Yeah, how strong one very specific one is too.
As you get more and more coordinated, people can kind of start to strategize around those big windows. So that's something that we've discussed not only on the not only on the counter side, but also on the combat side. Having, everyone's cooldowns across the entire raid always aligning at the same time is something that has kind of happened over time and has caused, kind of fallout, as it were.
This is actually a really interesting topic. I feel like a lot of people don't look at it too deeply. They're just like, if I ever have to stop DPS, that's bad. But you have to think. The reason why percentage-based phase pushes exist in this game and why they create the you have to stop DPS thing is just because of how OP gear is. How strong you get from the beginning of a patch to the end of a patch is too extreme. This raid, it was more extreme, and I'm not exaggerating, than it's ever been. You were stronger with domination shards 1 month after the raid came out relative to where you started more than any tier in the existence of this game. It was that broken. So it was more of a thing in this raid, not because the bosses were designed like that as much as it is you just got that strong. More than corruption. Corruption was more at the end of the tier, not 1 month later. You didn't have the corruption vendor and you didn't have the corruption you wanted a month into the raid. And not to mention we had most of the corruption we wanted from the very beginning with BOEs. So yeah. Having percentage-based pushes is actually cool in progression. Here's the problem. Making a boss week 1, week 2 with a percentage phase push can make it so you have to actually be good enough at P1 to ever get to P2. And it actually works. The problem is you get so powerful from gear now that those pushes end up being something where you have to hold DPS. So it's like the concept itself is cool. Like, for example, if their answer is, we don't want you guys to stop DPS in the raid anymore. If their answer to that is they're just going to remove phase-based pushes, because literally just the way the game works now, they will always end up like that, even though the concept initially is good. I actually think that would be bad for the game. They have to find a way. I don't really know a solution. They have to find a way to keep those, which are fundamental great WoW progression boss things, phase-based pushes. They have to make them better to where it's like foolproof in farm to where shit like that doesn't happen. And they've found some ways to do it. I just really hope they find a way around it. I really hope they don't. If they just remove the phase-based push to eliminate that problem in farm, I think that would affect the integrity of like WoW content, to be honest with you. No, time-based doesn't always work. Time-based and percent-based have 2 different difficulty thresholds, right? Time-based means you have to learn the entire phase, whatever. Phase percentage means I'll use Final Fantasy as an example, right? Like on Final Fantasy, almost all fights, especially Savage, do not have any like damage check except for the very end. It's like your damage 100 to 0. There's not a damage check 100 to 70, whatever. There is in a way that you need to do it to be on track to kill the boss at the end, but not to see the next phase. So when you add percentage-based phase pushes, you actually make multiple DPS checks in a fight actually matter, to where you can't even begin to learn P2 until you've mastered your damage in P1. Whereas opposed to like some WoW fights and basically every Final Fantasy fight, not every, like obviously there are some that are not, but you can actually just not do any damage at all and just only heal and do mechanics and see the entire fight and then add later. That's not necessarily the most efficient thing, but you could do that. When you add phase-based percentage pushes, you need to always be on top of your damage to see farther. And there are some fights where that works really well as a concept and some where it doesn't matter and some where it just ends up being bullshit like this in farm. So I hope they find a way around it, because the issue is not really the percentage-based pushes. It's the fact that you get way too strong way too fast in this game.
Yeah, staying on raid stuff and staying on raid bosses, Sylvanas as an encounter was a fairly epically done encounter, and it was quite long, is the way I
he's
would
trying
put it.
to say long.
Jason used the word marathon the other day when it came to describing encounters that are 12 to 15 minutes long. How are you feeling about these extended encounters, and are we expecting something similar as far as like that 12 to 15 minute range going into this next raid tier?
So for the record,
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure Shaw of Fear holds the record for longest.
It's up there for sure.
I actually don't know. What was the time on the first Sylvanas kill? Like, what was the enrage on Sylvanas? It was like 14 minutes or something like that. Most end bosses are like 12, 13 minutes, 11 to 13 minutes. So it's like a little bit longer. I don't know. Fight length is weird. So let's see how his take like kind of contrasts to mine. I don't mind fights being long as they're constantly challenging you. Like people, when I first started playing Final Fantasy, for example, not to keep talking because a lot of you guys don't play it, but like I was like a little wary of the ultimate fights because I was like, I just don't like long fights. I just think like in most MMOs that don't work well because you have, at least in WoW, a lot of the longer fights just had phases that seemed like they didn't need to be there, right? So like this is the best way to put it. So if you're going to look at reasons of why a fight is difficult, right? So on the right would just be straight up difficulty. And on the bottom would be why it's difficult, right? So like let's just simplify it even more to just mechanics, damage, and time. And total. Let's just do total at the end. Okay, so if this is the total difficulty of any, the hardest boss in any game, the end boss in WoW, the ultimate fight in Final Fantasy, if this is the total amount of difficulty for that raid, a bad example of a long fight would be done like this. It's like, this is how hard it is mechanically, this is how hard it is damage-wise, and like, this is how hard it is strictly because of time. Just because the fight is 16 minutes long, it's just hard because, you know, you have 6 minutes of an irrelevant phase and it wears you out before you get to the hard part. That's where my only argument would be just any single time you have anything like this of time, you just take the time element and you would just add it to damage or mechanics. Like if time is ever the reason why it's hard, that's bad. Every single fight that is that long and it's hard for that reason, I can give a few WoW examples, you would just shorten it by 3 minutes and increase the mechanical or throughput difficulty of the fight in general. That is like what I would like to do. But like what I didn't realize about Final Fantasy is like ultimates are weird. It's not like necessarily a super higher difficulty because most of the harder DPS checks in that game are actually like some of the mid-high level Savage stuff. But the ultimates are not designed to be like that because you can't like overgear them like you can on Savage. You can never do that technically, even though you kind of can with balance and some other shit. It's just like 3 Savage fights back to back. So if any of those phases in an ultimate fight felt irrelevant, it would feel too long. I've killed all of the ultimates in Final Fantasy. None of them felt super, super long because you were engaged the entire time. That's the issue with fight time. On Shaw of Fear, you spent 6 minutes to 8 minutes of that fight totally AFK. It was a waste of time. And in Sylvanas, P2, it was twice as long as it needed to be. N'Zoth, P1, probably twice as long as it needed to be. Ashara? Oh my god, why the fuck did Phase 1 of Mythic Ashara exist ever? Like, actually ever. Like, that is screaming to be done just like Gul'dan, where you have that Phase 1 in Heroic, but in Mythic, it's just fucking gone. It's just a complete and utter waste of time. You're only adding difficulty for the sake of time being a difficulty, which is just bad design. So interesting to hear his thoughts. Those are my thoughts on it.
Anyways, yes, Sylvanas, encounter length, I think, is what you were asking about. Yeah, so with our encounters, we always, you know, there's a story that we want to tell. There's an idea we want to get across. And when it comes to Sylvanas, given her history with WoW, there was a whole lot of story to tell.
I mean, I get it, because they make this game for other people. It's just like, a fight being long to tell a story doesn't matter to me, but I know I'm unique in that aspect.
You know, the bar we have to hold ourselves to is this encounter going to be fun to progress? Is it going to be engaging throughout? And also, are there going to be, you know, peaks and valleys in here, somewhere where you can kind of take a breather as you are progressing and getting ready for the next set. However, while there are some really, really epic encounters in the Sepulchre of the first ones, there won't be anything that runs that long.
Okay, great, good to know. When it comes to the raid itself, we know that it's having a little bit of a different release where we're actually gating.
Here we go.
The word gating is probably a bit harsh, but we're limiting the amount of bosses you can kill in the first week. Is what's happening. And can you talk a little bit about the decision behind choosing to limit the amount of bosses that we can kill in the first week, and then can we sort of expect a big sort of shift in gameplay or the zone itself in the week where we actually are able to, you know, after defeating that prime encounter, the Anduin encounter basically is I was trying to avoid saying it, but I'm just going to say it. The Anduin encounter to be able to move into the next wing, the next chunk.
Right. So Anduin, like the Anduin encounter itself, could really be the end boss of almost every other raid we've done. Right. Like he's such
Well, that's interesting.
a big character narratively. The stakes are really high. The encounter itself is super epic with a bunch of phases and all kinds of cool things that kind of unfold through that encounter. So that was something that we wanted to try to give time to breathe. There's also things that we'll learn from Anduin in the aftermath of that encounter that will lead us forward in the story, and also, without getting into spoilers, hopefully make sense as to why it was important in order to progress further in the raid as well. But something also to point out is the later raid bosses, the final 3, are actually...
This raid's gonna be long as fuck for 2 reasons. Number 1, if they're treating Anduin like a fucking end boss and it's the 8th boss, that's gonna create a massive wall. The 3 bosses after that are gonna be untested, which means that regardless of bugs, which it's kind of weird to talk about bugs because there's actually no evidence to suggest that untested bosses have more bugs than other bosses, because there's actually usually more bugs on tested bosses than there are untested. But then that's also weird information because end bosses are usually the ones that are untested, and they obviously get 10 times the development time, hopefully. And they would also, on these 3 bosses that they're not testing now, would have to put a lot more effort into testing them internally, so who knows how that'll turn out. It's honestly kind of a crapshoot. Your guess. WoW haters will say it'll be bad. I'll obviously wait to see. But it's going to be fucking long. Because, like, you know what it sounds like? You know how they said they always thought this was a 3-part act, a story told in 3 acts, to where 9.2 is the last one? Here's probably the reality. At the beginning of the expansion, Anduin's the boss in 9.2, and Zoval's the boss in 9.3. That's probably the reality. So they're just like, okay, fuck it. We'll just put them both in one raid because here's the end of the expansion. So they're probably going to have Anduin be beefy as fuck. This raid is going to fucking own. Calling it right now. It's going to be hard as fuck. Can't wait. And another reason, they always overcorrect. I can give you a bunch of examples from the past, but that'll just waste time. Just trust me, they always overcorrect when something goes wrong. These bosses will err on the side of too difficult than they will ever be too easy near the end of the raid. So let's fucking go. I want it long, chat. I want it long and hard. You heard it.
Be affected by boss 9
yes, sir.
being the end boss. That you'd have to be moving at a really quick pace for that to be something that you kind of bump up against. And also, this created kind of a unique opportunity for us to try something special and creating kind of more surprise, where some of the players seeing the jailer for the first time across a bunch of different difficulties. So speaking of which, no hard commitments to this. Like we're kind of
sure.
No, you should hard commit to this.
Figuring this out as we go, but we've seen a lot of community feedback when they heard about this news, about the release method, and how this is a really cool opportunity for, say, some of the Mythic players to go in blind on some of those last bosses. So there was questions about like, hey, are we going to be testing these in the PTR?
I wonder where
so
they heard that from the community. Let me find my tweet.
QA obviously will have a very large voice in this discussion. A lot of our engineering partners, but we're talking about what it would take to actually have it so that the players are seeing those last several bosses for the first time on live and not show them at all on the PTR.
Would be really cool if the last 3 bosses were not tested as well if they're releasing with Mythic. Makes progress more fun, more surprise to the story, and tests what it would be like to release content without public testing, because it would be a cool experience for future in the Raiders. Let's fucking go, chat. Let's go. A lot of other people said this too, but I'm taking full credit for this, by the way, just so you guys know. Yeah, no, chat, I'm claiming it. Here's the problem with you guys saying that it wasn't my idea. It's that I am claiming it's mine, so you have no choice. Do you know what I mean? Yeah, don't test fucking anything, man. What everyone wants to do is fucking walk up to that boss, learn its name, learn every ability, and like learn all that shit actually when they first see it. That's what everyone wants. But the thing is they can use the end of this raid to see how those last 3 bosses go. If those bosses are smooth to progress, they felt like they had a good hold of testing them internally, maybe then they can roll out the idea of doing an entire raid like that and kind of get away from the public testing aspect. That would be very cool. To be honest with you, that's what I like more than anything else. We're always going to do the preparation and the weak auras and the strat meetings and all that shit, because you're always going to do what it takes to win. But the best version of this content for literally the everyman in WoW is improvising and coming up with it on the fly. It makes it so much more interesting to watch, to do, to be a part of. It's really cool. So Really, really, really fucking hope they try super hard on these last 3 bosses, because the reality is, if there's a bunch of problems with them, we'll probably never see that happen. So
when it comes to Torghast,
for me, obviously other people are
new
different
layers
like that.
being added, and we know that you are still going to need some of those legendary mats to craft base legendaries to upgrade to the new ones. Are we seeing any updates to Box of Many Things, or is there going to be new stuff to chase inside Torghast for players?
Yeah, this is a good question,
in,
because they mentioned that Torghast won't be tied to player power, so that opens up a big can of worms. Is there, right? Like, is there any alternative other than them creating? I'll use the Mage Tower as an example, only to point out that the Mage Tower was just hard content that existed only for cosmetic and personal achievement. That's the only reason it existed, to challenge yourself and to get cool cosmetics. Okay, so adding that kind of a concept this patch to Torghast, when they previously could not do that because it was tied to player power, I'm actually really interested to hear what they do with that.
So no updates for the Box of Many Things. There will be some updates to Torghast, like we'll get some new floors. I think they're adding some new creature types in there.
But just new floors, though? Like, what is the point of just new floors unless it's, like, basically a totally different thing? Like, what will actually be the point to go in and do those higher floors of Torghast, right? And if the point is to challenge yourself, right? Then, yeah, let's see.
If people are excited about Torghast and still want to run it to get, some of that currency that they need to make their legendaries, Torghast will be an option to do there. So we're really focused on giving players a lot more options.
Well, yeah, but if it's the option, then
create their legendaries and create their set items. So Torghast is being updated to help support that goal. But also there's a new, I guess, wing of Torghast that we're developing, and hopefully will be up on the PTR soon, called the Jailer's Gauntlet. Similar to Twisting Corridors, this is for cosmetics only. And
except Twisting Corridors sucks.
Cool new
but
swag that you can get in there, and it's more of a like a boss rush mode, right? Like it's less traditional large open floors, lots of different trash.
Yes.
It's more like, all right, let's just
where's
slam a
that
bunch
fucking
of bosses in front of you back to back and see how far you can get.
Yes. Exactly. Yes, that's exactly what you should do.
Something that we're adding, and it will primarily be for cosmetics, or be for cosmetics.
Yeah, it'll be for cosmetics. As far as looking ahead, what were some of the lessons the team learned over the course of Shadowlands that they're feeling that they might be used to inform the future design?
Quick shout out to the Starting Zone. I'm actually going to tweet this before I forget. Do they have a Twitter? Dude, this is such a good interview. They asked just all the right questions for someone like me, at least. Obviously, there's probably people who want to know other stuff, but like me, my audience, they just fucking knocked it out of the park. That was so good. Morgan Day, this is your chance. This is your chance to just bring the hype, dude. We want to know what you all think about this expansion, honestly.
Sure. I'm going to choose 2 things. And again, this is for me. This is my opinion. I think, we've already talked about it a lot, but I think it's really, really important, and really, the team feels really strongly to try to kind of get our goals across, and, make changes that the player feels have, essentially been removing barriers for people who want to make additional characters.
Yes.
And as well as adding new catch-up for players, just more count-wide things. More things that if a player looks at and says, that's a frustrating thing to have to do the second time. There's a line there, like, yeah, you're gonna have to go earn the gear on your character.
You gotta play the game.
That's the point.
Yeah, you gotta play the game and earn the gear on your character. But then after you do that, it should be much easier for all the rest of your characters.
Yes. Game, but there are certainly things that we feel like, reach a threshold where you're like, why do I have to do this again? And a lot of those changes that you saw in 915 are things that we're trying to take forward into our Eternity's End update that you'll see in Zereth Mortis, that we feel will, really, hopefully create excitement around not only playing the game on maybe one of your characters, but try different characters. One of the best things about, all the different content that we make is playing it on a different class can feel completely different, like healing a dungeon versus tanking a dungeon versus,
yes, which is why we want to actually be able to play those things and not have to, this is interesting because like the systems that existed before this patch, currently 9.5 and 9.2, actively detracted from your ability to do what you're saying right now.
DPSing, even range DPS versus melee DPS, like very different experiences. and learning that again and earning the gear is really exciting. And we're trying to,
make it easier,
create excitement there and do as much as we can to incentivize people to check things out.
Yes. Where before it was de-incentivized.
What would be the second one I said?
It's true, man. It's the same thing as the last time I kind of heard an interview like this. I really like the change in perspective. A lot of people will just be like, and like I said, if you're someone who's like, I can listen to you talk about this all you want, Blizzard, but I'm just not here for that shit until it's actually in the game and I see it for myself. And I think that's a totally valid viewpoint. But I will tell you, from someone who pays very close attention to the things they say philosophically about what they want to do with their game, they have a different tune now than they have literally not had. And I didn't really pay attention back long, but like as far as I can remember, it's very, very promising, to be honest with you.
This is something that we're using, or we're kind of dipping our toe in the water with Legion Time Walking, but being able to experience, Legion Mythic Plus and the Mage Tower again, I think is something that is really, really, really cool for just the future of World of Warcraft. I think, like I mentioned, some of the cool new tools that we have at our disposal to kind of tune pieces of content very quickly and accurately is something that's really, really exciting for us.
That is exciting because, at least my Bong Cloud take for a long time has been to make Mythic Plus more interesting, that they can actually bring these dungeons back per season. This is the first time they've actually tried. You guys can bring up Time Walking. Time Walking is different shit. Time Walking is easy-ass old shit you do for, like, fun, cosmetics, whatever. Like, they're actually trying to bring back and tune these dungeons for current play. That's the first time they've done that. I really, really hope they try to bring back some of that in the game and just sprinkle it throughout as new season content. Because if there's anything that needs to be improved in the Mythic Plus area of this game, well, there's a lot of things, I guess, like the Keystone system and affixes and all that shit. There's still problems there. But there needs to be more variety every season. It cannot just be a new seasonal affix. There has to be more, and that's like the first step to that.
I think we have some really awesome content that our players loved, and finding new ways to allow players to experience that again is something that I think, I'm hoping we'll see with Legion Time Walking will be successful, and hopefully there's some lessons we can learn from that and kind of take forward.
Well, thank you very much. We are at our limit on time, and I don't want to take up any more of yours.
4 shout-outs.
Thank you again. I'm looking forward to the day when we can get together in person again and have a chat and maybe go out to get a drink at some point and chat up more World of Warcraft in some Hilton lobby or Parker Hotel or whatever it is, wherever we end up. So thank you again. I hope that you have an enjoyable weekend, and we really appreciate everything you're doing. I'm looking forward to playing some 9.2.
Awesome. Thank you all so much for having me, and it's always fun. Till next time.
Yeah, cool. So you guys want to follow them? I think you can. I'll move my camera for a second. Obviously, at Spencer Downey on Twitter, at Shieldwald on Twitter. Morgan Day doesn't have a Twitter, and then there's their Twitch, Twitter, and YouTube, Facebook stuff. If you guys want to follow them, that's really cool. It's a very good interview. Morgan Day said all of the right things. Obviously, only time will tell if they do all of the right things, right?